Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is exactly 9:45 a.m. News and views, wrapping up on our last interview. We're going to now talk with a president of the Allied Movement for Change. That is AM4C Party, Ahmed Munzoor Shaik, Emam. And we're going to be looking at the exploitation by other political parties on the Palestinian issue. Assalamu alaikum to you, dear brother. Welcome to the program. Nice to be talking with you once again.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And shukran for having me on the air from a very beautiful and warm city of Durban.
Alhamdulillah. Always a pleasure talking with you. And undoubtedly, you must be burning the candle at both ends. It must be really hectic leading up to the elections in approximately, 30 days' time?
That's it. 30 days is all we have. And in 30 days' time, a decision will be made into which direction South Africa is heading. Very important election.
Are you hopeful, regardless of what sort of, how many people come out and vote for your party? Despite that issue, are you hopeful for these elections being fair? Also, the fact that the results are going to speak directly to the people of South Africa?
Well, I must admit that we have various concerns about the legitimacy and the transparency and credibility of the elections itself. If you heard through some of the infighting in the ruling party, what has come out very clearly is how elections are rigged and manipulated. And particularly for parties that are new parties that are emerging and smaller parties, by virtue of the fact that they are hamstrung when it comes to funding. And I know many organizations and individuals have offered assistance, but unfortunately, nothing has been forthcoming. All the focus appears to be on the bigger parties. Focus appears to be on organizations that whoever you fund and whatever they will give you back in return. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, if you want to do the right thing based on Islamic ethos and principles, yes, you're going to go have a very difficult road to climb. But inshallah, we can make dua, and with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what we deserve, we will get, inshallah. All is in the hands of Allah.
Okay, a brilliant question from a listener, something that didn't cross my mind either. The listener's asking for those people who are going for Hajj this year and will be leaving before the elections actually happen, where and how can they vote?
Well, yes, very important question. And yes, indeed, provisions have been made where you can now register for a special vote. And I'm told provisions have been made through SAUK and their organization. They can get all the information as to where the voting will take place. But we must take up that opportunity. It is open, and I think it closes around 3rd. So yes, I plead with all our brothers and sisters there. First of all, I wish you a very successful Hajj, inshallah. But also let us not forget the decision that you take to vote or not to vote and who to vote is going to impact on the future of the country, but more importantly, on the freedom of religion, something we have enjoyed for a period of time, but it is under great threat at the moment as a result of the weaknesses in the ruling party and where they have taken us, but also with the attempts by Zionists to want to infiltrate and ensure there's a regime change in South Africa. So it's very important wherever we are, in whichever part of the world. I've heard last night and I was so encouraged. And I was in the crossroads. I didn't know what to say to people. Imagine a husband and wife spending 17,000 rand to fly from Auckland in New Zealand just to Wellington, because Wellington in New Zealand is the only place you can vote, just to cast 2 votes.
Wow.
What a message.
Absolutely. Your previous response to the question from the prospective Hajj leads me to ask you about your manifesto, because clearly you speak about freedom of religion. And what worries me is, are you then suggesting that constitutionally, there shouldn't be a question about freedom of religion? It's part of our constitution, our constitutional rights. Why are you concerned, and why did you make that comment?
Well, if you see what is happening currently in the country, and particularly in our stance on Palestine and other issues, Palestine, Russia, and many other issues, we have a constitution. But when organizations or parties have a majority, an absolute majority, that can be amended. Remember, they are not cast in stone. That's the first thing. But even if the constitution is not amended, and we have had great difficulty in many areas, even under the ANC government, when it came to the freedom of religion. Now, whilst we have enjoyed freedom to some extent or to a larger extent, but there were areas that were dominated by certain political parties where it was very difficult for us to even get authority to be able to put up masajids and jamaat khanas. And then there have been stringent restrictions as far as the adhan and things that were concerned. And we still have those restrictions despite the constitution talking about freedom of religion. Now, can you imagine those that are not in support of the only way of life, the perfect way of life, and that is the way of life of Islam? What is going to happen if they have had absolute power in the country? You can see what is happening in Palestine. Despite the protest actions and everything we're doing, the rights of the Palestinian people are still being violated. If you listen to the statement made by John Steenhuisen, it is such a threatening message, such an unfortunate message when he says one person's genocide is another person's freedom. He's justifying what is happening there. So what would happen in South Africa? What would happen right now as I speak to you with people in the Western Cape with all their land currently now being disposed of and being sold to Zionist and Jewish settlers in the Western Cape? Remember, they have totally ignored the first indigenous nation, the Khoi and San people. You understand, there is over 500,000 people on the waiting list for homes in the Western Cape. It's not important. What is important is that they are selling vast tracts of land to foreigners in this country, okay, and now particularly to the Zionists and the Jewish. Certain areas are already dominated by them. So what is the message that they are giving together with the leader of the DA? It simply means that's the direction they are heading. South Africa is a beautiful country, has enough human resources, all the mineral resources and the wealth in this country. So they're targeting South Africa. This is the great risk that we now are faced with. Remember what happened recently. Even those posters, the painting on the walls in your own private dwellings in the Western Cape, the city of Cape Town, have put a stop to it. So you can see the direction in which we are moving. So the constitution, while it is there, it's being violated. If you look at what is happening, I mean, you don't need a rocket scientist, to understand that human rights are human rights. It needs to be upheld. Doesn't matter what religion, caste, gender you belong to. And you make a statement of that nature. What does it simply tell us? Where are we heading? Look at the amount of money that is being put into South African politics. The constitution, we've made amendments. There are bills that were passed in terms of transparency, in terms of political party funding. How many of these political parties have actually disclosed the funding, and yet one rally that they hold is over 100 million rand? Look at the posters and that you have on the streets. Where is that money coming? Nobody's disclosed it. But there is provision in terms of the constitution and in terms of the policies in the country. They are being violated left, right, and center. There's no consequence management. There's no oversight. That is the problem we're sitting with. That's what it is.
Yeah, that indicates that people are being captured left, right, and center. That's the one sad fact. Politicians are being captured and parties are being captured. That being said, we've also heard cases, and I'm not sure if this was a discussion I'd had with you, and you now just confirming it, that the Western Cape is being turned into a mini Israel. Property prices have gone through the roof. Property prices are equal to what you'd pay for property in the UK and the US. Totally unaffordable for the working class people in the Western Cape and all of South Africa. And there's also the issue around service delivery. People are talking about service delivery in the Western Cape being top notch, but that is only for the rich and people who can afford it. Go to the townships, go to the Cape Flats. A service delivery is not being delivered, period. And of course, those are the issues we need to keep top of mind when we go and cast our votes, isn't it?
Well, certainly, yes. The Cape Town has now been reported as one of the 5 top corrupt municipalities in the country. And that is why I've raised repeatedly. It's easy to point fingers at others, but let's look back at our conduct and how we're performing. And so all the focus has been on the ANC. And yes, I must admit, to a very large extent, 30 years into democracy, the ANC has also failed us. And that is why I believe there needs to be alternative, not necessarily to get rid of the ANC, but even if it meant to work with them, but to hold them to account and follow the straight path in being able to bring the country back onto the right and the correct path for success and progress and prosperity. But very importantly, if you look at what is happening in the Western Cape, there is a serious threat that Western Cape people are going to face the same thing that the Palestinian people are facing. Remember, since the days of apartheid, the Israeli government has always colluded with the apartheid regime. And to a large extent, they still control the economy of South Africa, no matter which sector you look at. And we've done very little or nothing to get away from that. That is why if you look at the Western Cape, I've always said, it's like you've got 2 continents in one province, one for the rich and the other one for the poor. Nothing has changed for the people in the poor. Look at the land, an ideal example that you're selling. But yet you've got over 500,000 people on the waiting list. Some people are waiting for 30 and 40 years. People are dying on the waiting list. So do we really care about the poorest of the poor? Certainly not. I mean, funds are being diverted to the rich and affluent areas, the Bishop Courts and the Constantias and those areas. But what is happening in the Cape Flats, Nyanga, Langa, Hanover Park? I give you a good example. We know that particularly the colored community, and I hope inshallah someday we'll get rid of the term colored, they inherited the problem because they used to be paid with a dock system with alcohol. So they have alcohol fetal syndrome. What are you doing about trying to assist them? Rather than that, you are getting them to commit suicide by giving taverns and shebeens 24 hours operating licenses. And yet, most of the crime comes from them. Look at the socio-economic conditions under which they live. And I think people need to rise. This is the election. They have to take decisive action to ensure that they look deep into political parties and identify those that can bring about that change in their life. There is really no delivery of services in the Western Cape, particularly if you talk about the poorest of the poor areas. But go into the affluent area and look at what life is like.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up because time's almost up with a final question, but I also need to read out something that's been posted by Abu Zakaria. He says, true, the DA makes sure that all fat contracts are given to Zionist companies that funnel funds to Israel. And in the same vein, then let me give you my final question. It's about the issue of Palestine. Your party, AM4C, condemns political exploitation of apartheid, Israel, genocide on Palestine. You making this very strong statement ahead of the elections. Just talk to us a little bit more about it. And we do know that there are quite a number of political parties that are very pro-Israel and pro-Zionist.
Well, first of all, I must agree with Brother Abu there, Zakaria. There's no doubt about it. Corruption is high. If you look at the water crisis that never existed, day zero that never existed. And I was the one that highlighted they were getting a 600 million rand kickback from the Israelis and for the desalination plants and things like that. And I must admit that all these political parties, wherever they govern, are only giving contracts to people that they get a kickback from. That is the sad thing about it. But on the issue of Palestine, yes, indeed, Palestinians' problem didn't start yesterday or on the 7th of October. It's 1948. This is, if you look at the amount of time that has been spent and the atrocities that have been committed, the agreements that were entered as far as the Palestinian people, there was very little or nothing being done about by political parties in South Africa and around the world. Israel has violated every agreement you can think of, yet they're getting the support. Now, in a local aspect, let me touch on that. Very importantly, if you take in 2017, the ANC took a resolution to downgrade the South African embassy. Did they do it 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021? They didn't. I put in a motion to downgrade and recall our ambassador. And every 3 months, I had to postpone that thing. Because it expired, I had to renew it until my time came in terms of the rotational system, and they couldn't do nothing about it. And Alhamdulillah, we managed to achieve that. This was long before the 7th of October. Look at our brothers and sisters from Palestine who were regarded as terrorists. They couldn't come to this country because they were regarded as terrorists. It's only the influence, the persistence by myself, comparing to them how freely the Israelis were coming. Did we now able to achieve that they are able to come in without any visas into South Africa? But suddenly the political parties that were nowhere there, the good party, I give you a good example, never supported the motion, never supported the decision when we had to vote on all the motions that were put there. Suddenly we also see them. ANC is visiting every Muslim home which they did not respect for 30 years. Suddenly they need the vote because of Palestine. So is it really about the plight of the Palestinian people? Do we really feel the pain and suffering of our Palestinians? Or is this about scoring points? If we ask not wanting to score points and we care about the Palestinian cause, then we need to be consistent about the plight of the Palestinian people and many others. But we're not doing that. So I find parties are starting to capitalize on this. And there are also those that are selfish for their own business interests that are encouraging people to support institutions because of what they're getting back. So I think we need to be very objective and ask ourselves, what realistically have we done for the Palestinian cause? Going to the ICJ, good thing. What have we achieved? Our people are still dying in Palestine every day. This week alone, 35 people already, So we're not achieving what yet we could do a lot more. I give you a good example. Those in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, South Africans are here right now bragging about the atrocities and how they massacred our people. Why is our government not doing enough about it? Why are we not having a targeted approach to boycotting them? Why are we not putting in measures to deal with the industry that we do business with from Israel? There are lots we can do. We're choosing not to do, but we can do it. But we're choosing those aspects that we know we're not going to achieve enough. So I don't think there's a level of sincerity as far as that is concerned.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thank you indeed for your insights. Much duas for success for the AM4C party coming up in the elections. Stay strong. Allah be with one and all, inshallah. Until the next time, Assalamu alaikum.
Ameen. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thank you indeed for being with me today. I'll be back with you on Monday morning at the same time. And we do hope you've enjoyed all of the interviews and given you food for thought. So till then, as always, Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Ali.